Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Joe Patrick on football. By the way, apologies for the reaction video, the sound quality on the reaction video that posted after the Falcons game against the Colts. I clearly did not have something plugged in that disrupted that. So, thank you guys for bearing with me on that one. And I meant to kind of get another show out sooner, our kind of midweek show here, but. And ultimately, I'm glad I waited because we did. It was an interesting day. Just got home from Falcons practice day on Wednesday. It's now Wednesday evening. You might not be listening to this or seeing it until Thursday, but some interesting stuff, some interesting observations, I would say, from Falcons practice where, I think we really saw after that game a different kind of demeanor from the Falcons players. If you saw any of the locker room reaction that the players were having, that was posted on YouTube, it was clearly a dejected group, a group that was down on themselves, maybe most epitomized by Michael Penix Jr. in his press conference, where he just looked incredibly frustrated. Maybe even more so in the exclusive interview that he does with Dave Archer, that's on Fox 5 and 92.9 The Game, and on their YouTube reels or whatever, where he was clearly down and almost at the point of it looked like breaking down a little bit. And that's never where you want your quarterback. I think when people saw that, you're obviously concerned about where this quarterback's head is and like where the development stands. Is more harm than good being done at this point when he is in that state after the game? But ultimately, it's one of those things where, he just takes a lot of that burden on his shoulders. And he said it today when he was talking to media that, it's something that he kind of grew up with from his dad, who was, held him to a very high standard as a kid. He told a story back in the day about he forgot his belt to a little league baseball game, their all-star game or travel team or something like that. Forgot his belt, and his dad was the coach, and his dad wouldn't let him play because he didn't pack. He didn't pack properly. Didn't have his entire uniform ready to go, and so he had to watch that from the sidelines. And obviously, Michael, little kid at the time, was not very happy about that. But it just kind of goes to show you the kind of discipline and just the standard that, frankly, his dad set for him as a kid. And I think that leads us to today, and he's clearly feeling responsible, basically, for this downturn in the Falcons season that has really gone sideways now with 4 straight losses and this team trying to get over the hump. So it was interesting to see him today kind of grappling with some of this stuff. Again, it's not the kind of day that I love as a football head and a Falcons fan. Like I've talked about it before. Like I am a Falcons fan at heart. I'm not gonna lie. So I want to see this team win. I want to be talking to Penix about great throws he had, and I want to hear him brag on his teammates about how good they are and everything. But that was just not the case today. It was just a different Michael Penix. And I would say that it wasn't one that was like completely dejected. It wasn't the Michael Penix that we saw in those post game interviews. And he talked about the fact that he had a heart to heart with Raheem Morris this week. I believe that would have been either on Monday or Tuesday, sometime following the loss. Where they just talked about this stuff, and Raheem Morris talked about it a bunch as well. About just wanting to sit with Mike and just let him know that it's not all on him. They have to play better around him. And the more I kind of watch some of the tape and think about it, I think that Raheem Morris is exactly right. The team has to play better around Michael Penix. And it's not that Penix has been great or anything. He's obviously had games where he's been better, he's been worse, and I would say that this game against the Colts, he had some of his more egregious misses that he's had so far this season, but still, there are plays to be made that his teammates are just not making consistently. We can talk about Kyle Pitts. He obviously has that drop on that crosser that could have potentially gone for a touchdown. That's what the announcers were saying. It's harder for us in the broadcast to actually see what exactly kind of green grass was ahead of Kyle Pitts there, but certainly had some room to run after the catch. That would have been a big play and put the team at least in scoring position. Obviously, also had that one down the sideline, the fade, where just either wasn't able to locate the ball or didn't really make that much of a play for it. And Raheem Morris said that, like for him in particular, that was one where he actually did kind of get himself going and got his own mistakes corrected later in that game. But you can't have that first half Kyle Pitts. You got to have the second half Kyle Pitts. But we could talk about the receivers, and obviously there's going to be a lot of talk about the receivers because the receivers next to Drake London have done next to nothing. And by the way, maybe one of the reasons why Darnell Mooney has had such a rough season, we did see that, or we heard from Raheem Morris on Dukes and Bell just this afternoon. So this might be new to you if you're watching this. That Darnell Mooney broke his collarbone in training camp on that first day of practice in training camp, diving for a ball. Pretty amazing that he was like up and moving afterwards. Like I even saw him after that injury. He was like up and like moving his shoulders around and stuff like that. We were told it was a shoulder injury. I mean, and a collarbone is right there, involving the shoulder clearly. But that's a significant injury though for him to have come back. I forget. Did he come back week 2? Was he back for the Vikings game in week 2? If not, he was definitely back for week 3. And that's a pretty quick return from a collarbone break, but it would definitely stand to reason why they've had such lack of connection, which I even asked Raheem Morris about specifically in his Monday press conference. But obviously the receivers have not produced. But the more and more I think about who can play better for Michael Penix, around Michael Penix, it's the offensive line, and we've talked about it before on the show that the offensive line has been really rough, picking up stunts, picking up blitzes, especially like delayed blitzes or overloaded blitzes onto one side. They're just not kind of distributing the rush and picking up the blocks in the way that they should, from lineman to lineman. Like, when it's good when you see when you're watching the tape and you just see the lineman kind of connect onto one player, like each one just kind of grabs one, and if one's looping around, you see that trade-off happen. And for the Falcons, it's been such a mess on that front. And we also know, in addition to the pass protection issues that they've had, just a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about how they were having a big problem not identifying fronts correctly, not getting, I believe this cropped up in the Dolphins game, not getting to the right opposition players they were supposed to be getting to in the run game. And to me, that falls a lot on the center of identifying the front. And Raheem Morris has been saying, Zach Robinson also said, Michael Penix has been right on, spot on with like getting into the protections he needs to be into when they're in some of these pass plays. And it's ultimately just the offensive line is not getting the job done. And it's disheartening because you have like two really, really quality offensive linemen that you've invested a lot into, and Jake Matthews and Chris Lindstrom, and even Caleb McGarry on that right side, who obviously has not been able to play this year after suffering a season-ending injury in training camp. But even still, I would say Elijah Wilkinson is actually not the cause of the problems. He's of course been beaten before, had a rough game against the 49ers. He's had games that are like better than some, better or worse here and there. But ultimately, I think the problems really stem at the center position, first of all, and then also kind of secondarily at the left guard position, where I feel like there's also been that struggle to properly pass off the blocks. But I want to kind of just, focus on that center position for a second, because there was a very critical decision that this team made this offseason. And this is where we get into like criticisms of Terry Fontenot and the direction, and just some of these big decisions that general managers have to make. And I think that this one is one that the team got wrong. And I think that if they had to go back and redo it again, I think they would do some things differently this offseason. And I think keeping Drew Dahlman around probably would have been one of those things they would have done, because ultimately Dahlman left for, a reasonable amount of money. I think, I forget exactly how much it was, like 13, 14 million. I think a lot of people thought that at that price he would have been back to the Falcons. Now you can also make the case, like, listen, like if the Falcons give Dahlman that contract, then they didn't really spend that much money in general. Like, they didn't really have a ton of money to spend, so you probably don't get Divine Diablo in that case. And it's a fair point. It's a fair trade-off. But ultimately, for me, I think that for the future of the franchise, you kind of want that offensive line set up so that the thing that Michael Penix is having to deal with this season that is potentially disrupting some developments, clearly disrupting what this offense was supposed to be. That that he wouldn't have to be going through all this right now. And Ryan Newsel, bless his heart, like the guy, I think I still think he's an above average. Well, he's like a solid run blocker. Like he's solid in the run game. I would even say he's solid just as like a on one pass protector, like in terms of the ability to pass block a man. But that's not everything that goes into pass protection. Like you have to have a certain awareness and an ability to give ground when you need to, so that you're kind of in line with your teammate and being able to pass off these stunting and twisting defenders. And it's something that's pretty basic, and it's just really thrown the Falcons' offensive line for a loop. And I feel like Michael Penix is kind of seeing some ghosts even sometimes when he's not getting the rush. He's kind of anticipating that's going to come because the offensive line has been so porous and allowing some really quick pressures, which is, I think, the thing that gets a quarterback a little bit jittery. So I really kind of think that that's been one of the biggest problem areas for this team this year. And it's just one that doesn't really, no one talks about the center. Like no one on sports talk radio is talking about the center. I say that as someone who works, I'm representing 92.9 The Game when I'm up there. And I will try to present this, I definitely will talk about it when I'm on Chris Thomas's show tomorrow. Andy and Randy, I'll be on Thursday as well. And the Wade Ford Tailgate Show, of course, with Andy Bunker, 4 hours before kickoff every Sunday or Monday, whenever the Falcons play. We'll talk about it, but it's just not a sexy thing to talk about. It's like you want to be talking about the star players, and when the team's not playing well, it's got to be because the star players aren't playing well. And Michael Penix is not always playing well, but I think that part of it is him for sure, and those things should be talked about. I'm not saying they shouldn't. But I think that there are some issues, obviously, that are happening on the offensive line that are leading to, I think, some downturn in play from him. And it's been an issue for this team and this offense. And it is looking like the thing that's going to keep them out of the playoffs. And I would say that, I always encourage everybody to go and watch the press conferences for yourself. I know they can be a little bit dry. But if you go back and listen to Raheem Morris or Zach Robinson today, the two offensive coaches, I guess we can say that about Raheem because his fellow coaches chide him for being an offensive coach now. But they're talking about the offensive line, even though all the questions are about Michael Penix, or whoever. They're not, the questions in the press conference are not really about the offensive line. They would be if we had like an offensive line coach to talk about. That would be That would be good. But they're getting these questions about the star players, and so they're responding about the star players. But like you will hear inserted into these responses things about, we have to pass protect better. And it's not like calling out the offense. It's not like Ryan Newsel's got to play better, or it's not that. So it's not that obvious, but it's like, and we got to get the pass protection set. And we got to make sure we're on our P's and Q's passing off the stunts. It's like these things that they say that's very clear, but it's just easy to get lost in the overall message of the press conference and what question they're actually answering. So that's been a big problem for this team, and just something that's been under talked about. And I think until they get it corrected, I think they're gonna continue to struggle. It's not to say they can't win a game, but I just think they're going to be generally inconsistent. And Michael Penix can start to get erratic. I think when he doesn't have his feet set and he starts to get rushed. I think like we've seen in some of his worst performing games so far this season. Jeff Ulbrich, kind of fun, just talked about worst performing games for Michael Penix. Jeff Ulbrich said today was the best day of practice they've had all season, which tells you a lot about where this team is mentally. And I was wondering, again, after seeing those post-game press conferences and locker room interviews with several of the players, Ulbrich said that the DNA of this team is still to fight. Zach Robinson mentioned that Raheem Morris kind of talked about his experience with the Rams just a couple years ago, having been at 3-6 and ultimately making the playoffs. And by the way, Zach said that what Raheem was saying was, I guess Zach was on that. Zach was actually speaking personally because Zach was also on that staff, and he said that when you kind of put it out in the air, like guys, we're 3-6. Like there's we got nothing to lose basically at this point. We got to go out and turn it loose, and that can actually, you know, unlock you a little bit, I think, and let you play a little bit more free. And I think that that's what they're hoping to see. But certainly, with the way that Jeff Ulbrich was describing what happened today, is a good thing for the Falcons. And I don't think like everybody should be looking forward to seeing this team play better, in my opinion, because you don't have that first round pick. I know that obviously your other picks are going to be affected by your overall record and whatnot, but I would rather see the team play well. I would rather see Michael Penix start to get in a rhythm, build some confidence, build some confidence in the fan base going into next year. I think that if I'm just kind of reading, X.com correctly, and the Falcons fan base, it's like people actually don't want that to happen, not because of the draft pick, but because they're already sold on Raheem Morris being out or wanting him out, and run toward the end of the season could spur ownership, leadership to bringing him back. I would say that's doubtful, and like my opinion is that they probably should move on. I'll talk about it in a second. One of the really concerning things that happened this week that makes me say that, but I don't know. I just wouldn't worry about that. I think the more important thing is for Michael Penix to get going. And let me just like talk about Raheem real quick. He's great. I really enjoy his company. He's an interesting, entertaining press conference sometimes. He did mention today I would say his demeanor was different today. It felt more like honest. And he even said, like, it was honest to the point where he said that he's not honest with us. He basically said that, like, however, he may have even, I wish I had the exact quote in front of me, but he said, like, however much I want to tell you guys, or however honest I want to be with you, something like that. He, like, just literally said that today, which is a little shocking. That he would make that admission, but he's Raheem. I don't know. The thing that concerned me about Raheem this week was, in response to a question I posed to him on Monday in the press conference. I asked him why the team wanted to receive the ball in overtime of this Colts game, and that used to be you don't even think about it. Like, you're desperate to win that coin toss to get the ball because of exactly what happened to the Falcons. I mean, the Falcons fans know more than anybody that you would have wanted to receive the ball, but maybe partially because of that game, the overtime rules changed, and now it's more like college. If anybody's unaware, both teams now get a chance to have the ball. It used to be if you received and you score a touchdown, game was over. Now, if you score a touchdown, the other team has a chance to come back and score a touchdown themselves. And Raheem's response just did not make sense to me. It didn't make any strategic sense. It made strategic sense in one sense, which was that he said that, if you get that third possession, then you basically have the ball and time is most likely going to run out on that possession. So you basically have the chance to go win it from there. But that's the third possession of overtime. Like, that's not what you should really be prioritizing. And his initial strategic response to the question of, like, what's the strategy there of receiving the ball was, and this doesn't make any sense to me, but you want to go out because, like, you want to I actually have the quote on my Twitter account, so I should probably go just pull from there if you hang with me. He said, that's part of our strategy to get the ball. You get the ball, you're going to have to get it. You're going to have to get it back. They're going to know what they need to go win it, but you also know what you need to do on defense to go out there and get a stop. So let's stop right there. You obviously have a strategic advantage if you're playing second because you know what you need to do to score to try to tie a game. You basically have an extra down versus the team that gets the ball initially, because the team who gets the ball initially has to play it like it's kind of normal football. Like, you can't take that many risks. If it's third, if you go 3 and out, you got to punt. You can't really take the risk of not getting it, and basically then if you don't get it, you lose the game at that point. Where if you punt it, you actually give yourself some chance. Whereas if I feel stupid having to explain this, but like if you get the ball second, the other team has already done its thing, whether they didn't score, whether they scored a touchdown or a field goal, and you have the strategic advantage at that point where if you know you have to score a field goal or a touchdown, and what happened to the Falcons in on their first drive of overtime, they go through 3 downs and don't pick up a first down. Well, then obviously you can just go for it on fourth down, and you don't really have that much to worry about. You're worrying about getting the first down, of course, but you're not in a situation like the Falcons were, where they had to punt the ball away. So you get the extra down basically the entire time, and I guess that diminishes if you just need a field goal to potentially tie to continue the game, et cetera, et cetera. But you get what I'm saying. Like that, it just does not make strategic sense to receive the ball, and that response, it just worries me. It worries me. Like, what is the strategy? Was this thought through? I'll continue the quote. He says, "You also have a chance to get that third possession, which we talked about. Then after that, it gets scarce for running out of time and going into potentially the tie situation. So for us, it's kind of which direction we want to go. That's something that we've talked about ad nauseum a little bit, and that's kind of what we wanted to go with. So, like, to me, that's just like, it feels like not being prepared for that situation and making the wrong strategic decision. I can understand. I think it's also the wrong strategic decision to receive the ball to start games, like he's been wanting to do as well. And I do wonder if maybe this was like the error was they just treated the kickoff like it was an opening game kickoff, and wanted to take the ball for the reasons they've given for that in the past, which is, you want to get confidence, you want to, put your offense on the field immediately, hopefully get a lead, and then be able to play with some like kind of game state in your advantage going forward. I don't think it's the right strategic decision, but I understand it, and Raheem Morris has also added like the time of possession factor. That you can, I guess, establish off the bat if you are able to, have a long drive and then maybe get a quick 3-and-out, get the ball back, and then you put the other team in a bind. But obviously the strategy behind not receiving is that you can play and strategize around the first half, just knowing that you're going to get that ball in the second half. So if that means bleeding a bunch of clock at the end of the first half, or trying to call timeouts to save time to get the ball back for another drive, knowing that you have that you're receiving in the second half can sometimes, in some circumstances, give you an extra possession, an extra bite at the apple, based on the way that you're able to use your timeouts, knowing that you're going to get that extra possession. So, or that second half possession. So, just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me, and it's bad strategy, and it's so basic to me. That's the thing. It's almost like a litmus test of like, if I can't trust you to get this basic strategy decision correct, what else are we missing here? What else is going on? And like I always say, I feel a little ridiculous sometimes because it's like the whole man in the arena thing, and I feel bad criticizing when they're the professionals and they're the ones who have been in this game thinking about it literally every single day of their lives, almost since the time they were 20 years old, or whenever their professional career started, at least. And I'm just someone who's watching games on TV. I'm literally asking them about the sport to teach me more about it so I better understand it. But like, this is such a basic thing. Like, I feel like I'm in the right to hold this valid criticism, and this is obviously just builds on top of everything else that we've seen. All the other issues that you can validly make about this Falcons team, and how much they've underperformed expectations so far this year. So it's a tough one for that reason. Like, and I think that management, I don't want to like speak for them. Well, I won't. I'll leave it there. But no one's less pleased. I would I would say than probably Arthur Blank. The team owner who so desperately wants to win. And I'll also say this is not related to the Falcons, but it is related to another team that I cover, Atlanta United. And I've had the opportunity to talk to people inside the organization, kind of off the record situations, and they're like when the team is doing badly, they are as critical as you will find, and it's a different sport. And yeah, there is definitely more outside criticism in NFL circles than there is certainly in MLS. But make no mistake, like just because they're saying certain things about being positive and improving, et cetera, in the public toward the media, it doesn't mean they aren't very fiercely critical of themselves behind closed doors. And I'm like, that sounds like I'm speaking about the coaching staff, which I kind of am as well. But I'm certainly talking about like how the leadership of the club is most likely looking at the situation, and I know that they are fiercely disappointed with how the season is going. So we'll just wrap it up there. That was got kind of sensitive there. Got kind of some sensitive topics, and I hate to say it, but that's just where my head is at this point in time. But the Falcons have a huge game. Could be a platform for them to potentially put some wins together. You never know. Frankly, I kind of think that even if they win this game big, I would have no expectation that they actually go out and are able to repeat that performance the following week until they actually prove to me that they can do that, because they just have not been able to prove it over the last number of years. But or it certainly could be, the accelerator for some changes and stuff if they were to lose this game, especially in like an ugly fashion, which I know, again, like I know fans want, I know you guys want. I think that you want a firing because you don't think Raheem obviously is the right person for the job, and because you want that signaled to you, and I fully understand that. I fully understand the concern that exists when it feels like you're not being heard and the concerns are not being kind of validated behind closed doors, but. Yeah, I think there's the opportunity for that to happen if things go south against the Panthers in a key game. Obviously, the Falcons want to reverse what happened to them in Week 3, where they lost 30-0, a historic loss, as Raheem Morris said. So we'll leave it there. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you like the video, click like. But seriously, like if you want to see this video more in your algorithm, just click like. I think it also just like helps YouTube know that you're a real person watching this and not like a crawling bot or something. So auto playing on some website. So click like for us so the world knows that you're there. And you can follow us, obviously, if you're watching this on 929 The Game's YouTube channel. You can watch the show there. If you want to listen to us on podcast form, just search Joe Patrick on football wherever you get your podcasts. You can use the Odyssey app if you'd like, but wherever you get your pods, just search Joe Patrick on football. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.